Before we begin, please note that I am not a financial advisor, and this video is for educational and informational purposes only. The content presented here is not intended to be a recommendation to buy or sell any security. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. You should always conduct your own research and consult with a licensed financial professional before making any investment decisions. Every time you pull up to the pump, you feel it, don't you? That little wince as you watch the numbers spin. Or when you open your utility bill and see the cost to heat or cool your home. Energy isn't just a headline on the news. It's a direct hit to your wallet every single day. But what if I told you there's a way to flip the script? What if, instead of just being a consumer of energy, you could become an owner? What if a piece of that price at the pump, or that line item on your electric bill, could actually find its way back into your pocket? Now you might be thinking, investing? In oil and gas? Isn't that for Wall Street titans and Texas billionaires? Or maybe you think the real money is all in tech stocks. Well, let me ask you this. What was the single best performing sector in the entire S&P 500 for 2 years running, beating out every single hot tech stock you can name? It wasn't software. It wasn't biotech. It was energy, by a mile. For too long, the world of energy investing has been shrouded in mystery, filled with confusing jargon and intimidating concepts. This series is going to change that. Over the next 10 parts, we are going to pull back the curtain on the most powerful industry on the planet. We're going to demystify it, break it down into simple, understandable pieces, and give you the foundational knowledge you need to see the energy sector not as an expense, but as a potential opportunity. We're going to cut through the noise, ignore the hype, and focus on the fundamentals, how it all works, who the key players are, and the different ways you can get a piece of the action. And understanding this sector has never been more critical. We're living through the most dynamic and disruptive period in the history of energy. We have the ongoing demand for traditional fuels like oil and natural gas that literally power our entire modern world. At the same time, we have the explosive growth of renewables, the rise of electric vehicles, and a global push toward a lower carbon future. This isn't a simple oil versus solar story. It's a complex, multi-trillion-dollar transition filled with immense challenges and incredible opportunities for those who understand the landscape. So, where do we even begin? It's a massive industry. To make sense of it, you first need to understand that the traditional oil and gas industry is broken down into 3 main categories. Think of it as the journey of energy from deep within the earth to your gas tank. These categories are upstream, midstream, and downstream. Get these 3, and you've understood the fundamental business model of the entire sector. Let's start with the one that gets all the attention, the one you see in the movies, upstream. Upstream is all about exploration and production. These are the modern-day treasure hunters. Their entire business is about finding deposits of oil and natural gas trapped miles beneath the Earth's surface, and then figuring out how to get it out. This is the riskiest, most volatile, and potentially most rewarding part of the energy food chain. Think of an upstream company like a wildcatter drilling a new well. They spend millions, sometimes billions, of dollars on seismic imaging, geological surveys, and leasing land, all before they've drilled a single hole. They are betting that they'll find a massive reservoir. If they hit a gusher, the payoff can be astronomical. The value of their company can skyrocket overnight. But if they drill and come up with nothing, a dry hole, all that money is just gone, vanished. The players in the upstream space range from the giants, the super majors like ExxonMobil, Chevron, and Shell, to hundreds of smaller, more aggressive independent producers. The super majors are like global empires. They have massive, diversified portfolios of projects all over the world, from deep water rigs in the Gulf of Mexico to shale fields in West Texas. Their sheer size gives them a bit of a cushion. A dry hole in one location can be offset by a big discovery somewhere else. The independent producers, on the other hand, are often more focused. They might specialize in a particular region, like the Permian Basin in Texas or the Bakken Shale in North Dakota. They can be more nimble and can grow much faster than the super majors, but they also carry more risk because their fortunes are tied to a smaller number of projects. So, what drives the success or failure of an upstream company? It's brutally simple. The price of a barrel of oil and the price of natural gas. Their entire business model is based on pulling a commodity out of the ground and selling it on the global market. The cost to get it out of the ground is relatively fixed in the short term. So, if the price of oil jumps from $70 a barrel to $90 a barrel, that extra $20 flows almost directly to their bottom line. It's pure profit. This is what we call operating leverage, And it's why upstream stocks can absolutely soar when energy prices are high. But that sword cuts both ways. When the price of oil collapses, as it has done many times in history, the pain for upstream companies is immediate and severe. Their revenue plummets, but their costs to operate the wells remain. Profits disappear. They have to slash spending, lay off workers, and sometimes they go bankrupt. It's a classic boom and bust cycle. Investing in upstream is a direct bet on the price of the commodity. You're not betting on a fancy new technology or a clever marketing plan. You're betting on the global supply and demand for oil and gas. Think about the last couple of years. When geopolitical events caused oil prices to spike, which stocks went on an absolute tear? It was the upstream producers. They were printing money. But think back to 2020, when demand collapsed and prices briefly went negative. Those same companies were fighting for survival. That's the high-stakes game of upstream. High risk, high reward, and tied directly to the price you see on the news every single night. So, upstream is about finding and producing the raw material. It's the exciting, high-octane start to the journey. But once that oil or gas is out of the ground, what happens next? Can't just sit there in a field in Texas. It has to be transported, often thousands of miles, to the people who will refine it and turn it into the products we use every day. And that brings us to the second link in the chain, the midstream sector. This is the essential, and often overlooked, circulatory system of the energy world. It's the pipelines, the storage tanks, the processing facilities, and the transport ships that act as the vital arteries connecting the upstream producers to the downstream refiners. And as we'll explore in the next part, the business model here is completely different. It's not about the thrill of discovery. It's about being the indispensable toll road operator of the energy highway, collecting a fee for every single barrel that passes through, regardless of its price. It's a world of steady, predictable cash flow that offers a compelling contrast to the wild ride of the upstream. So let's unpack that idea of the energy highway toll booth. Imagine a massive, sprawling network of steel arteries, stretching for hundreds of thousands of miles, crisscrossing the country, often buried deep beneath our feet. This is the midstream sector. It's the essential link, the circulatory system that connects the remote, dusty oil fields of the upstream to the bustling population centers where the energy is actually used. Without it, all that oil and natural gas is completely stranded, a valuable resource with no way to get to market. The midstream business is fundamentally a logistics and transportation game. It's about moving massive quantities of hydrocarbons from point A to point B, safely and efficiently. The companies in this space own and operate the pipelines, the storage tanks, the processing facilities, and the export terminals. They don't own the oil and they don't own the gas station. They own the road in between. And for investors, the real beauty lies in how they get paid. Most midstream revenue isn't tied to the volatile price of a barrel of oil. Instead, it's generated through long-term, fee-based contracts. Think of it this way. If you're a trucking company, UPS doesn't pay you based on the value of the packages in your truck. They pay you a set fee to move a box from Los Angeles to New York. The midstream company does the same. An upstream producer says, "I need you to move 1 million barrels of oil from the Permian Basin to a refinery on the Gulf Coast." The midstream company replies, "Great. That'll be $5 a barrel, please." Whether that oil is worth $40 or $140 a barrel is almost irrelevant to the midstream operator. They get their $5 toll. This insulates them from the gut-wrenching volatility that upstream producers live and die by. But it gets even better. The gold standard in the midstream world is a type of contract called a take-or-pay agreement. And this is where the business model becomes truly powerful. A take-or-pay contract is exactly what it sounds like. The upstream producer agrees to ship a certain volume of oil or gas through a pipeline over a long period, say 10 or 15 years. And they have to pay the pipeline operator for that reserved capacity, whether they actually use it or not. It's like having a gym membership. You pay your $60 a month whether you go once or 30 times. The gym gets its revenue regardless of your attendance. In the same way, a major oil producer might reserve enough pipeline space to move 100,000 barrels a day. Even if they only end up producing and shipping 80,000 barrels one day because of a temporary well shutdown, they still have to pay the full fee for all 100,000 barrels of reserved space. This creates an incredibly predictable, stable, and recurring revenue stream for the midstream company. It's the closest thing to a guaranteed paycheck you can find in the entire energy sector. It's this contractual foundation that allows many midstream companies to pay out consistent, and often very generous, dividends to their shareholders. Now, let's look at the actual physical assets these companies own, because they are colossal feats of engineering. First, you have the pipelines themselves. There are gathering pipelines, which are like small country roads, collecting oil and gas from individual wells. Then there are the massive interstate transmission pipelines, the superhighways of the system, some large enough for a person to crawl through, moving enormous volumes across the country at high pressure. Building a new major pipeline in the United States today is incredibly difficult. It requires navigating a labyrinth of federal, state, and local regulations, environmental impact studies, and right-of-way acquisitions. This difficulty, while a headache for growth, creates a powerful competitive advantage, or a moat, for existing pipeline owners. Their assets are often irreplaceable. Next, you have storage facilities. These are the giant tank farms you might see near coastal ports, or the massive underground salt caverns used to store natural gas. Storage is the energy grid's shock absorber. It allows companies to store energy when prices are low and sell it when prices are high, or to ensure a steady supply during periods of peak demand, like a cold winter snap. It's the nation's energy savings account, and midstream companies own and operate it, charging rent for the space. Then come the processing and fractionation plants. Raw natural gas that comes out of the ground isn't just the methane we burn in our stoves. It's a mix of different hydrocarbons like ethane, propane, and butane. It has to be processed to separate these components. The methane is sent into the natural gas grid, while the other components, known as natural gas liquids or NGLs, become crucial feedstocks for the petrochemical industry, used to make everything from plastics to fertilizers. These processing plants are the sophisticated refineries of the natural gas world, and again they operate on fee-based models. So the reward for investing in this sector is clear. Potential for stable, fee-based cash flow, a degree of insulation from commodity price swings, and often attractive dividend yields. But what are the risks? It's not a magic bullet. The biggest risk is something called counterparty risk. The midstream company's revenue is only as good as the contracts it signs. If the upstream producer who signed that 10-year take-or-pay contract goes bankrupt, the contract might be worthless. So, you have to look at the quality of the midstream company's customers. Are they big stable players like ExxonMobil and Chevron, or smaller, more speculative drillers? Another risk is volume risk. While a take-or-pay contract protects revenue, if an entire oil-producing region, known as a basin, goes into a long-term decline, eventually those contracts will expire, and there will be less oil and gas to move. A pipeline with nothing to transport is just a very expensive piece of buried steel. And finally, there's regulatory and political risk. A stroke of a pen in Washington or a state capital can make it harder or easier to build, operate, and maintain these critical infrastructure assets. One last crucial detail about this sector is its unique corporate structure. Many of the largest pipeline companies are organized not as regular corporations, but as master limited partnerships or MLPs. This is a special, publicly traded business structure that gets favorable tax treatment. An MLP doesn't pay corporate income tax. Instead, it passes its profits and the tax liability directly through to its investors, who are called unit holders. This allows MLPs to pay out a much larger percentage of their cash flow as distributions, which is why they are famous for their high yields. However, this structure comes with a major complication for investors: the dreaded Schedule K-1 tax form. Instead of the simple 1099 DIV form you get from a regular stock dividend, owning an MLP means you get a complex K-1 that you have to file with your taxes. It can add a layer of complexity that some investors prefer to avoid. There are ways around this, like investing in ETFs that hold MLPs or in midstream companies that are structured as traditional C corporations, but it's a defining feature of the sector that every potential investor needs to be aware of. So, our barrel of oil has now been safely extracted by the upstream producer. It has traveled hundreds of miles through the midstream network of pipelines, paying its toll along the way. It's been gathered, processed, and transported. But its journey isn't over. It has arrived at a massive, sprawling industrial complex, filled with towers, tanks, and a maze of pipes, glowing like a city at night. It has reached the refinery, the gateway to the final stage of its transformation. This is the domain of the downstream sector, where crude oil is chemically cracked, boiled, and transformed into the gasoline in our cars, the jet fuel in our planes, and the countless other products that power our modern world. And it's in this final stage, this world of refining and marketing, that the entire economic equation of energy can be flipped on its head. Think of a refinery not as a dirty factory, but as a colossal high-tech molecular kitchen. Crude oil in all its raw sludgy glory is the base ingredient. It's pumped into giant distillation towers, some soaring 30 stories high, and heated to over 1,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Just like in a distillery, this process separates the oil into its constituent parts based on their boiling points. The lightest elements like propane and butane vaporize first and rise to the top. Heavier molecules like those for diesel and heating oil condense in the middle. And at the very bottom, you're left with the thickest, densest stuff, bitumen for asphalt roads and heavy fuel oil for massive cargo ships. This isn't just boiling. It's a form of modern alchemy. Catalytic crackers use intense pressure, heat, and chemical catalysts to literally break large hydrocarbon molecules into smaller, more valuable ones. This is how the world gets its massive supply of gasoline. Every day, these sprawling industrial complexes, mazes of pipes, towers, and tanks, take in millions of barrels of crude oil and churn out the refined fuels that are the lifeblood of our economy. But they also create the building blocks for so much more. The lubricants that keep engines from seizing, the kerosene that becomes jet fuel, and critically, the petrochemicals, the ethylene, propylene, and benzene, that are the foundational ingredients for plastics, fertilizers, synthetic rubber, and pharmaceuticals. Almost everything you touch that isn't made of metal, wood, or glass started its life inside one of these refineries. Now, for an investor, this is where things get really interesting. You might assume that a company that sells gasoline wants the price of its main ingredient, crude oil, to be as low as possible. And you'd be right. But it's not that simple. The profitability of a downstream company isn't determined by the price of oil. It's determined by the difference between the price of oil and the price of the refined products it sells. This crucial metric, the holy grail of the refining business, is called the crack spread. The name comes from that cracking process we just talked about. The crack spread is the profit margin a refiner gets for buying a barrel of crude oil and cracking it into gasoline and other products. So if a barrel of oil costs $80, and the gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel produced from that barrel can be sold for a total of $100, the crack spread is $20. That $20 margin is the refiner's gross profit. It has to cover their operating costs, the immense energy needed to run the refinery, the payroll for its engineers, everything. Whatever is left over is their net profit. Why does this matter so much? Because it creates a fascinating paradox. A pure-play downstream company, a refiner like Valero or Marathon Petroleum, can actually make more money when the price of crude oil is falling. Imagine a scenario where crude prices plummet from $100 a barrel down to $60. Everyone panics. But at the same time, demand for gasoline at the pump stays incredibly strong because people are excited about cheaper fuel. The price of gasoline might only drop a little bit, while the refiner's main input cost just fell off a cliff. Their crack spread widens dramatically, and their profits can explode, even while the upstream oil drillers are suffering. This makes downstream companies a potential hedge within an energy portfolio. They often thrive in a different price environment than the producers, creating a powerful balancing act. So we have these three distinct stages: the upstream producers who find and pump the oil, the midstream companies who transport and store it, and the downstream refiners who turn it into usable products. They are all interconnected, yet they operate on very different business models and respond to different economic forces. But what if a company didn't have to choose? What if a company could do it all? This brings us to the titans of the industry, the household names you know: ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell. These are the integrated majors, or as they're often called, the super majors. They are called integrated because they operate across the entire value chain. An integrated major owns the oil fields in West Texas, upstream, owns the pipelines that carry that oil to the Gulf Coast, midstream, and owns the refineries in Louisiana that turn it into gasoline and the gas stations that sell it to you, downstream. They control the molecule from the moment it leaves the ground to the moment it enters your car. From an investment perspective, this integration is their superpower. It provides immense diversification and stability. When crude oil prices are sky-high, their upstream exploration and production segment prints money, generating enormous cash flows. During these times, their downstream refining arm might get squeezed as their input costs soar. But the profits from the oil wells more than make up for it. Conversely, when oil prices crash, their upstream profits evaporate. But, as we just discussed, their downstream refining and chemical businesses can suddenly become wildly profitable as their input costs plummet, providing a crucial cushion to the company's bottom line. This built-in hedge makes the integrated majors the blue-chip stocks of the energy world. They are the massive, dividend-paying behemoths that are designed to weather the violent boom and bust cycles of the oil market far better than a company that only specializes in one single part of the process. But the story of energy isn't just about oil. There's another fossil fuel, one that has been called the bridge to a cleaner future, and its story has completely reshaped global geopolitics in the last decade. We're talking about natural gas. For a long time, natural gas was the unwanted sibling of the oil industry. When companies drilled for oil, they often hit pockets of gas. In the early days, without infrastructure to capture and transport it, they would simply burn it off in a process called flaring. It was seen as a nuisance. But today, natural gas, which is mostly methane, is a cornerstone of the global energy supply. It heats our homes, cooks our food, and most importantly, it generates a massive and growing portion of our electricity. It's considered a bridge fuel, because while it's still a fossil fuel, burning it for power releases significantly less carbon dioxide than burning coal. The business structure of natural gas mirrors that of oil. You have upstream companies that specialize in drilling for gas, particularly in shale formations like the Marcellus in Appalachia. You have midstream companies that operate the vast network of interstate pipelines that crisscross the country like a steel spiderweb, moving the gas from the wellhead to the cities. And you have the downstream consumers, the utility companies that burn the gas in power plants to generate electricity, and the local distribution companies that pipe it directly into our homes and businesses. For decades, the market for natural gas was almost entirely regional. If you weren't connected by a pipeline, you couldn't get the gas. A gas producer in Texas could only sell to customers in North America. Europe had to buy its gas from Russia. Japan had to buy it from Indonesia. The oceans were insurmountable barriers. But then a revolutionary technology changed everything. Liquefied natural gas, or LNG. The concept is both simple and mind-bogglingly complex. Natural gas, by its very nature, takes up a lot of space. To ship it across an ocean, you need to make it smaller. The way you do that is by making it incredibly, unbelievably cold. At massive, multi-billion-dollar liquefaction facilities built along the coast, natural gas is chilled to -260 degrees Fahrenheit. At that temperature, it transforms from a gas into a liquid, shrinking in volume by 600 times. Suddenly, a vast quantity of energy can be loaded into the giant, futuristic spherical tanks of a specialized LNG carrier ship. What was once a regional commodity trapped by pipelines could now be put on a boat and sold to anyone, anywhere in the world. This technological marvel unlocked the global gas trade. It allowed the United States, with its immense shale gas reserves, to become one of the world's largest energy exporters, sending shiploads of LNG to allies in Europe and energy-hungry markets in Asia. Companies that build and operate these liquefaction terminals, like Cheniere Energy, or the companies that own the specialized fleet of LNG ships, have become critical players in this new global energy map. They represent a massive growth area, sitting at the intersection of energy, manufacturing, and international trade. Understanding LNG is understanding the future of how the world is powered. So now we have a clearer picture of the landscape. We have the oil and gas producers, the pipeline operators, the refiners, and the integrated giants who do it all. We understand the difference between a barrel of WTI crude and a cubic foot of natural gas. But we've missed a huge, critical piece of the puzzle. We've talked about all the companies that own the resources. But what about the companies that make all of this possible? The ones who own the drills, the seismic technology, the fracking crews, and the subsea robots? They represent an entirely different way to invest in this story. A world of picks and shovels in the great energy gold rush. This picks and shovels strategy is one of the oldest and most powerful concepts in investing. During the California gold rush, the people who consistently made the most money weren't the thousands of prospectors who risked everything for a lucky strike. It was the people who sold them the picks, the shovels, the blue jeans, and the wheelbarrows. They made money whether a miner found a mountain of gold or a bucket of dirt. They were betting on the activity, not the outcome. In the energy world, this role is played by the oilfield services companies. These are the ultimate contractors, the specialists, the hired guns. The upstream companies, the Exxons and Chevrons we talked about, they might own the rights to the land, but they don't always own the highly specialized, multi-million-dollar equipment and the expert crews needed to get the oil and gas out. So, they pick up the phone and call companies like SLB, formerly known as Schlumberger or Halliburton or Baker Hughes. These are the titans of the services industry. What do? Almost everything. They are the ones with the advanced seismic imaging technology that creates a 3D map of the rock formations 2 miles beneath the Earth's surface, telling the drillers exactly where to aim. They are the ones who own and operate the colossal drilling rigs, the towering structures that bore through solid rock with diamond-tipped bits. And once the well is drilled, they are the ones who perform the modern magic of hydraulic fracturing, or fracking. They manage the fleets of trucks, the high-pressure pumps, and the complex chemical slurries that unlock the oil and gas from the tight shale rock. They do the well completions, the maintenance, the data analysis. They are the indispensable partners in production. Investing in these service companies is a very different bet than investing in an oil producer. Their fortunes are not directly tied to the daily price of a barrel of oil. Instead, they are tied to the capital expenditure budgets of the entire industry. When oil prices are high and producers are flush with cash, they go on a spending spree. They want to drill more wells, explore new areas, and maximize their production while the good times last. And who gets all that new business? The service companies. Their phones ring off the hook, their equipment is fully booked, and they can start charging higher prices for their services. In a bull market for oil, investing in service companies can be like pouring gasoline on a fire. It's a leveraged bet on the boom itself. But this leverage is a double-edged sword. When the price of oil crashes, what's the first thing an upstream producer does to save money? They cancel drilling contracts. They stop all new exploration. They slash their capital expenditure budgets to the bone. And the service companies are the first to feel that pain, and they feel it hard. Their revenue can fall off a cliff almost overnight. This makes them incredibly cyclical, prone to spectacular booms and devastating busts. An investment in a top-tier service company is a bet that the global demand for drilling and production activity is going to rise. It's a high-risk, high-reward play on the heartbeat of the industry. So, the service companies have done their job. The well is drilled, it's been fracked, and now oil and natural gas are flowing to the surface. But now what? A wellhead in the middle of West Texas or North Dakota is thousands of miles from the refineries on the Gulf Coast, or the homes in New England that need natural gas for heating. The oil doesn't just teleport there. It has to be moved. And this brings us to the second major support category in the energy ecosystem: the midstream sector. If upstream companies are the miners and service companies are the sellers of picks and shovels, then midstream companies are the owners of the railroads and highways. They are the energy industry's ultimate toll collectors. The midstream sector is all about logistics: gathering, processing, transportation, and storage. They own and operate the vast, unseen circulatory system of the nation. We're talking about millions of miles of pipelines that crisscross the continent like a giant steel web. We're talking about massive storage facilities, some in giant salt caverns deep underground, that can hold hundreds of millions of barrels of oil, acting as a buffer for the entire market. They own the cryogenic processing plants that separate raw natural gas into pure methane and other valuable byproducts like propane and ethane. They own the terminals at ports that load this energy onto supertankers to be shipped around the world. Companies like Enterprise Products Partners, Kinder Morgan, and Williams Companies are giants in this space. And their business model is the polar opposite of the volatile service companies. Most midstream companies operate on long-term, fee-based contracts. An oil producer will sign a contract for, say, 10 or 20 years to reserve a certain amount of capacity in a pipeline. And here's the magic phrase: take or pay. This means the producer has to pay the pipeline owner for that reserved space whether they actually ship any oil or not. Think about that. It completely changes the investment thesis. The midstream company's revenue is no longer primarily dependent on the price of oil or the frantic pace of drilling. It's dependent on the signature on a long-term contract. They are essentially landlords, collecting rent on their steel tenants. This creates incredibly stable, predictable, and consistent cash flows, year in and year out. It's the boring, unglamorous, but often highly profitable plumbing of the energy world. Because of this stability, midstream companies are famous for one thing: paying dividends. They are beloved by income-focused investors. Since their cash flows are so reliable, they can return a large portion of it to shareholders in the form of regular payments. For someone looking to generate a steady income stream from their portfolio, the midstream sector has historically been one of the first places they look. But it's not a risk-free paradise. The biggest threat to these companies isn't the price of oil. It's politics and public perception. Trying to build a new pipeline in the United States today is an absolute nightmare. You face a gauntlet of regulatory approvals at the local, state, and federal levels, and you face fierce opposition from environmental groups and landowners. A single court ruling can delay a multi-billion-dollar project for years or kill it entirely. This creates enormous barriers to entry, which is good for existing pipeline owners, but it also means growth can be very difficult to come by. Another risk is counterparty risk. That take-or-pay contract is only as good as the company that signed it. If a small upstream producer goes bankrupt during a severe downturn, they might default on their pipeline payments, leaving the midstream company with a loss. And finally, because they are viewed as stable income investments, they can be sensitive to interest rates. When interest rates rise, the yields on ultra-safe government bonds also rise, making the dividend yield from a midstream company look less attractive by comparison, which can put pressure on their stock price. So you have two completely different ways to invest in the infrastructure that supports the energy boom. You can ride the volatile, high-octane wave of the oilfield services companies, betting on activity and technological prowess. Or you can opt for the slow and steady, income-generating toll road model of the midstream companies, betting on the long-term need to move energy from point A to point B. Both are essential, both are powerful, but they offer investors fundamentally different journeys. But the journey isn't over. That crude oil, fresh from its long pipeline ride, is still just a thick black liquid. It's not gasoline. It's not jet fuel. It's not the plastic in your phone. To become those things, it has to go through a fiery transformation, a modern-day alchemy that happens inside the towering steel cathedrals of the refinery. This is where the magic and the money truly gets made. Inside these industrial labyrinths, crude oil is boiled in colossal distillation columns, some stretching 30 stories into the sky. The process is both brilliantly simple and mind-bogglingly complex. Heat is the great separator. Just like steam rises from a boiling pot of water, the heated crude oil vaporizes. As this vapor rises up the column, it cools. And at different temperatures, different parts of the oil turn back into liquid, collected on massive trays at different levels. At the very top, where it's coolest, the lightest molecules condense, things like propane and butane. A little further down, you get the lifeblood of our transportation system, gasoline. Lower still, where it's hotter, you get jet fuel and kerosene, then diesel. Further down, the heavier stuff, lubricating oils for engines, waxes for candles. And at the very bottom, in the scorching heat, you're left with the thickest, densest materials, bitumen to make asphalt for our roads, and heavy fuel oil to power the massive ships that cross our oceans. One barrel of raw, messy crude oil is systematically and beautifully deconstructed into 100 different products that power every facet of modern life. But refiners aren't just sorting, they're alchemists. They can take those heavy, less valuable molecules from the bottom of the barrel and, using intense pressure, high heat, and chemical catalysts, literally crack them apart into smaller, lighter, and far more valuable molecules like gasoline. This is the core business of refining. Not just separating, but upgrading. Taking a cheap, heavy raw material and transforming it into a premium, high-demand product. So, how do you invest in this? This entire process, from the moment the crude leaves the wellhead to the moment it's a finished product, is broadly known as the midstream sector. And refiners are the superstars of this segment. But here's the secret, the single most important concept you need to understand about investing in them. It's a term you'll hear traders and analysts whisper about constantly: the crack spread. Sounds like a drug, but it's actually the key to their profits. The crack spread is simply the price difference between a barrel of crude oil and the refined products that can be made from it. Let's make it simple. Imagine a refiner buys a barrel of crude oil for $80. After they process it, they can sell the resulting gasoline, diesel, and other products for a combined total of $100. The $20 difference? That's the crack spread. That's their gross profit margin. This is a revolutionary idea for most new investors, because it means a refiner's profitability isn't directly tied to high oil prices. In fact, sometimes they make their highest profits when the price of crude oil is falling. Think about it. If the price of crude drops to $70, but the price of gasoline at the pump only drops a little bit, let's say the total value of the refined products is now $95. Their spread just widened from $20 to $25. They are now more profitable, even as the headline price of oil is going down. This decouples your investment from a simple bet on whether oil goes up or down. You're not betting on the commodity. You're betting on the margin. You're betting on the demand for the finished products, for gasoline, for jet fuel, for plastic. You're betting on the skill of the alchemist. What influences this spread? It's a constant tug of war. On one side, you have the cost of crude. On the other, you have the demand for refined products. This is why seasonality is huge for refiners. Every summer, when millions of Americans hit the road for vacation, demand for gasoline surges. This is called the summer driving season. and it typically widens the crack spread, leading to massive profits for refiners in the second and third quarters. In the winter, demand for heating oil in the Northeast can do the same thing. Unexpected events are also a massive driver. If a hurricane rolls through the Gulf of Mexico and forces several major refineries to shut down, the supply of gasoline suddenly plummets. But the demand doesn't change. People still need to drive to work. The result? The price of gasoline spikes, the crack spread for the refineries that are still operating explodes, and their investors can be handsomely rewarded. But refining is only one piece of the midstream puzzle. Once that crude oil is transformed into gasoline, it doesn't magically appear at your local gas station. It has to be moved, and that brings us to the second major group of midstream companies, the transporters and storers. Think of these as the toll road operators of the energy world. They own and operate the vast, unseen circulatory system of the country. Hundreds of thousands of miles of pipelines, sprawling storage tank farms that can hold millions of barrels, fleets of tanker ships, trains, and trucks. Their business model is often beautifully simple and incredibly stable. An oil company like ExxonMobil might come to a pipeline operator and say, "We need to move 10 million barrels of gasoline from our refinery in Houston to a distribution hub in Atlanta." The pipeline company doesn't care about the price of that gasoline. They don't care about the crack spread. They just charge a fee for every barrel that flows through their pipe. They are a fee-for-service business. Their revenue is based on volume. As long as the oil and gas is flowing, they are getting paid. It's a steady, predictable, cash-generating machine. This makes them incredibly attractive to investors who are looking for income and stability, rather than the more volatile profits of the drillers or even the refiners. Many of these pipeline and storage companies are structured as master limited partnerships, or MLPs. This is a special business structure that comes with some unique tax advantages and typically pays out very high dividends, or distributions, to its investors. It's a way to get a direct piece of that stable fee-based cash flow. So, the midstream sector gives you two very different ways to play the energy market. You can invest in the refiners, the alchemists who profit from the volatile, but potentially lucrative crack spread, betting on their ability to transform crude into cash. Or you can invest in the pipeline and storage companies, the toll collectors who generate steady, predictable income simply by controlling the arteries of the industry. Both are essential. Without the drillers, there's nothing to refine. But without the midstream players, that crude oil is just a landlocked puddle of useless black liquid. It has no way to get to the refinery, and the resulting gasoline has no way to get to the market. We've now followed a drop of oil from deep beneath the earth, watched it get ripped from the rock, and seen it transformed in a tower of fire. It's been sorted, cracked, and upgraded into the fuel that powers our lives. It's sitting in a massive storage tank at a refinery in Texas, ready for the final leg of its journey. But how does it get from that tank farm to the 10,000-gallon tank buried under your local 7-Eleven? This final critical link in the chain, the one you interact with every single week, is a multi-trillion-dollar business with its own unique rules, its own titans, and its own set of risks and rewards. And that is where our story goes next. We call it downstream, and it's the part of the energy leviathan that lives in plain sight, hiding its colossal scale behind the familiar glow of a gas station sign. This is where crude oil, that raw, unrefined lifeblood of civilization, is finally tamed, transformed, and delivered to your doorstep. It's the final, brutal, and often misunderstood chapter in oil's journey from the center of the earth to the center of your life. Forget the wildcatters and the pipeline welders for a moment. The titans of the downstream world are a different breed. They are master chemists, logistical wizards, and ruthless retailers. Their kingdom is the refinery, a sprawling metallic city of pipes, towers, and tanks that hums with immense power, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Think of a refinery not as a factory, but as a deconstruction plant. A barrel of crude oil, which is really just a complex cocktail of different hydrocarbon molecules, rolls in one end. The refinery's job is to smash that cocktail apart, sorting the molecules by weight and size in colossal distillation towers that can stretch 40 stories into the sky. The lightest, most valuable molecules are siphoned off to become things like propane and gasoline. The middleweight molecules become jet fuel and diesel. The heavy, sludgy stuff at the bottom becomes asphalt for our roads, bunker fuel for massive cargo ships, or the base for lubricating oils. And that's not even counting the petrochemicals, the building blocks for virtually every plastic product you own. That phone case in your pocket? The dashboard of your car? The synthetic fibers in your workout clothes? They all started their life in one of these fiery industrial cathedrals. Now, for an investor, understanding this process is crucial because it leads to the single most important metric in the downstream business: the crack spread. It sounds like a term from a back-alley deal, but it's the life or death number for every refiner on the planet. The crack spread is simply the difference between the price the refinery pays for a barrel of crude oil and the combined price of all the refined products it sells from that barrel. It's their gross profit margin. Imagine you're a baker. You buy a 50-pound bag of flour for $20. From that flour, you bake 40 loaves of bread that you sell for $2 each. Your total revenue is $80. Your cost for the raw material was $20. Your crack spread is $60. That's it. For refiners, the flour is crude oil, and the bread is gasoline, diesel, and jet fuel. When the price of gasoline shoots up, but the price of crude oil stays flat or falls, the crack spread widens, and refiners like Valero, Marathon Petroleum, and Phillips 66 print money. They swim in cash. Their stock prices can soar. But when the opposite happens, when crude prices spike but they can't pass that cost on to consumers at the pump because of weak demand, the crack spread gets squeezed. Profits evaporate, and investors feel the pain. This makes investing in pure-play refiners a fascinating but cyclical game. It's not a direct bet on the price of oil. In fact, sometimes it's the opposite. A refiner can do extremely well when oil prices are falling, as their main input cost is getting cheaper. Their fate is tied to that margin, that spread. And that spread is influenced by everything: economic growth, driving season demand in the summer, hurricane season in the Gulf of Mexico shutting down refineries and squeezing supply, even global airline travel, which dictates demand for jet fuel. The barrier to entry here is enormous. You can't just decide to build a new major refinery in the United States. The environmental regulations, the capital cost, we're talking tens of billions of dollars, and the local opposition make it virtually impossible. The last major refinery built in the US was in 1977. This means the existing players have a massive moat around their business. They own a critical piece of American infrastructure that cannot be easily replicated. But there's a massive electric elephant in the room, isn't there? What happens to a company whose entire business model is based on turning crude oil into gasoline when cars no longer use gasoline? This is the existential threat that looms over the entire refining sector. And it's why these stocks often trade at what looks like a steep discount compared to the rest of the market. The market is pricing in a potential terminal decline. So, are they dinosaurs waiting for the meteor? Not so fast. First, the transition to electric vehicles will take decades, not years. There are over 280 million internal combustion engine vehicles on US roads today. They aren't all disappearing tomorrow. Second, remember that refineries don't just make gasoline. They make diesel for the trucks that deliver everything you buy, jet fuel for the planes that fly you on vacation, and the petrochemicals that are the foundation of the modern material world. Third, these companies are not standing still. They are aggressively investing in renewable diesel and sustainable aviation fuel, using their existing infrastructure to process things like soybean oil and use cooking grease instead of crude oil. They are positioning themselves to be part of the energy transition, not just a victim of it. But the downstream story doesn't end at the refinery gate. The final leg of the journey is marketing and retail. This is the world of gas stations. And here's one of the biggest secrets in the entire energy industry. Gas stations don't make much money selling gas. The margin on a gallon of gasoline can be just a few pennies. It's a high-volume, razor-thin business designed to do one thing: get you to stop. The real money, the true profit center, is inside the convenience store. It's the $2 fountain soda that costs them a dime. It's the coffee, the hot dogs, the lottery tickets, the bags of chips. That's the cash cow. Companies like Casey's General Stores or Murphy USA are masters of this universe. You might think of them as energy companies, but it's more accurate to think of them as real estate and retail companies that happen to use low-margin gasoline as a lure to sell you high-margin pizza and cigarettes. Their business is about location, supply chain efficiency, and understanding consumer behavior. When you invest in a company like this, you're not just betting on the crack spread. You're betting on the American consumer's love for convenience. So as an investor, you have choices. You can invest in an integrated supermajor like ExxonMobil or Chevron. They are upstream, midstream, and downstream. Their refining operations act as a natural hedge. When the price of crude oil they produce goes down, their input costs for their refineries also go down, helping to cushion the blow. Or you can make a more concentrated bet. You can invest in a pure-play refiner like Valero, a direct wager on their operational efficiency and the health of the crack spread. Or you could sidestep the refining volatility altogether and invest in a retailer like Casey's, a bet on real estate and the enduring appeal of the convenience store. We've now followed the journey of a single drop of oil, from its discovery deep within the earth, through the vast network of pipelines, to the complex chemical alchemy of the refinery, and finally, to the tank of a car at a corner gas station. We've mapped the entire century-old kingdom of fossil fuels. But what happens when the car no longer needs oil? What happens when the energy that powers our world doesn't come from ancient sunlight trapped in fossils, but from new sunlight captured by a panel on your roof? What happens when it comes from the force of the wind, or the heat of the earth, or the splitting of the very atom itself? A new energy war is being fought. It's a war not for oil fields, but for battery chemistry. Not for pipelines, but for the electrical grid. A fundamental disruption is underway, and the battlefield for the next 100 years is being drawn right now. And on this new battlefield, the first wave of insurgents challenging the old energy empire isn't a nation-state. It's a technology, the solar panel. For decades, solar was a rounding error, a hobby for environmentalists and off-gridders. It was expensive, inefficient, and seen as a novelty. But then something incredible happened. The cost of solar power plummeted. Not by a little, but by an order of magnitude. In the last decade alone, the cost to generate a megawatt-hour of electricity from solar has fallen by nearly 90%. It is now, in many parts of the world, the cheapest form of new electricity generation in human history. Think about that for a second. The cheapest way to make power is no longer by burning something we dig out of the ground, but by capturing free energy from a star 93 million miles away. This isn't a forecast, it's a reality today, and it has created an investment tidal wave. The opportunities aren't just in the companies that manufacture the iconic silicon panels themselves, giants like First Solar or Canadian Solar. The ecosystem is vast. You have companies that make the inverters, the crucial brains that convert the panel's DC power into the AC power our homes use. You have companies that engineer and build massive, utility-scale solar farms that stretch for miles across the desert. And you have the residential solar companies, the ones that install panels on rooftops, often bundling it with financing, turning homeowners into miniature power producers. Each step in this value chain represents a different kind of investment, with different risks and rewards. Marching alongside solar is its powerful sibling, wind. While solar panels are becoming a common sight on suburban roofs, wind turbines are monuments of industrial scale. Onshore wind farms, with their towering white sentinels, have become a familiar part of the landscape in places like Texas and the Great Plains. The technology here is mature, and the investment case is often about scale, efficiency, and location. But the next frontier, the one that has engineers and investors buzzing, is offshore wind. These are true megaprojects. Turbines so large their blades are longer than a 747's wingspan, planted miles out at sea in the harshest conditions imaginable. The investment required is astronomical, but so is the potential payoff. The winds at sea are stronger and more consistent than on land. An offshore wind farm can power a major city. Investing here is different. It's less about the individual turbine manufacturer and more about the massive industrial conglomerates, the specialized engineering firms that lay undersea cables, and the operators who can manage these colossal ocean-faring power plants. But this new army of renewables has a glaring vulnerability, a strategic weakness that the old guard of energy has always pointed to, and for good reason. They call it intermittency. The sun sets every night. The wind dies down. And when it does, the power stops. You can't run a hospital, a data center, or a modern economy on power that only shows up when conditions are perfect. For the green energy revolution to truly conquer the globe, it has to solve this problem. It has to find a way to store that cheap, clean energy when it's abundant and release it when it's needed. This is the holy grail, the linchpin of the entire transition: energy storage. And right now, the undisputed king of that realm is the lithium-ion battery. The same technology that powers your phone and your laptop is being scaled up to the size of buildings, creating massive batteries that can stabilize the entire electrical grid. This is the heart of the battery chemistry war. The demand for the raw materials that go into these batteries, lithium, cobalt, nickel, manganese, graphite, has exploded. This has created a global scramble, a modern-day gold rush. Investing in this space means looking at the entire supply chain. you have the mining companies, from massive multinational corporations to smaller, more speculative operations trying to tap into new deposits. Then you have the chemical companies that refine these raw materials into battery-grade chemicals. After that come the cell and pack manufacturers, the companies that are in a fierce race to improve energy density, lower costs, and increase safety. And finally, you have the companies integrating these batteries into the grid or into electric vehicles. It's a complex, volatile, and incredibly dynamic sector where fortunes will be made and lost on the back of scientific breakthroughs and geopolitical shifts. But lithium-ion isn't the only soldier in this fight. Scientists and startups are racing to find the next generation of storage. Solid-state batteries promise a leap in safety and performance. Sodium-ion batteries could offer a cheaper alternative by replacing expensive lithium with abundant salt. And there are other technologies entirely, like flow batteries designed for long-duration storage, or even old-school ideas being given a modern twist, like pumped storage hydro, which uses excess electricity to pump water uphill into a reservoir, effectively creating a giant gravity-powered battery. And all of this, the solar farms, the wind turbines, the giant batteries, connects to the single most important, and perhaps most overlooked piece of the entire energy puzzle: the electrical grid. The grid is the circulatory system of our modern world. It's a sprawling, impossibly complex network of high-voltage transmission lines, substations, and transformers that was largely built in the 20th century for a 20th century energy system. It was designed for a few large, centralized power plants like coal or gas to push power outwards in one direction. But the new energy world looks completely different. It's decentralized, with millions of points of generation, from rooftop solar panels to massive offshore wind farms. It's also intermittent, meaning power flows can change direction and intensity in seconds. The old analog grid simply cannot handle this. It needs to be rebuilt. It needs to become a smart grid. This requires a staggering level of investment. We're talking about trillions of dollars globally over the next few decades. This is the ultimate picks and shovels play of the energy transition. The investment opportunities are in the companies that make the high-voltage cables, the advanced transformers, the smart meters, and the sophisticated software that manages energy flows in real time. It's not as glamorous as a new battery chemistry, but without these fundamental upgrades, the entire renewable energy revolution grinds to a halt. The war for the future of energy isn't just about how we make power, but how we move it. So the battle lines are clear. On one side, the disruptive technologies of solar and wind, offering the cheapest energy in history. On the other, the critical challenge of intermittency, being met by a furious innovation race in battery and storage technology. And holding it all together is the sprawling, essential, and aging electrical grid, hungry for trillions in new investment. These are the pillars of the new energy economy. But as this new world is being built, a powerful and controversial energy source from the last century is demanding a second look. An energy source that offers clean 24/7 power without any intermittency, but carries with it a legacy of fear and a price tag that can break a nation's budget. And it just might be the most misunderstood investment in the entire energy sector. We're talking, of course, about nuclear energy, the atomic promise. For decades, the word itself has been a conversation stopper, conjuring black and white images of mushroom clouds and grainy news reports from places like 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, and Fukushima. The ghosts of these events are long, and they've cast a shadow over the entire industry, creating a deep, instinctual fear in the public consciousness. And let's be honest, that fear isn't entirely irrational. When nuclear goes wrong, it goes spectacularly wrong. The consequences are measured not in days or weeks, but in generations. So for the longest time, investing in nuclear felt like investing in horse-drawn carriages after the invention of the automobile. It was a legacy technology, a relic of the Cold War, burdened by terrifying risk and brutal economics. Building a traditional large-scale nuclear power plant is one of the most complex and expensive engineering projects humanity can undertake. The price tag isn't measured in millions but tens of billions of dollars. They take over a decade to build, and are notorious for crippling delays and budget overruns that can bankrupt even the largest utility companies. The infamous Vogtle plant expansion in Georgia, for instance, ended up costing more than double its original budget, a staggering $35 billion. Faced with that reality, and with the rise of cheap natural gas and ever-cheaper solar and wind, nuclear power was left for dead in the United States and much of the Western world. But then something changed. The world woke up and realized two fundamental truths at the exact same time. First, the climate crisis is real. and the need to decarbonize our grid is urgent. Second, a grid powered only by intermittent renewables like solar and wind is an unstable grid. The sun doesn't always shine, and the wind doesn't always blow. You need a source of clean, reliable 24/7 baseload power to keep the lights on when nature doesn't cooperate. And suddenly, the only technology that checks all those boxes was the one everyone had forgotten. This realization has sparked what many are calling a nuclear renaissance. Governments around the world, from France to Japan to the United States, are reversing course, extending the lives of old plants and, for the first time in decades, seriously funding the development of new ones. And this shift in sentiment has created a fascinating, multi-layered investment opportunity, but one that is absolutely riddled with pitfalls for the uninformed. So where does the smart money flow? How do you invest in this atomic comeback? Well, there are 4 primary avenues, each with a completely different risk profile. The first and most explosive way is to invest directly in the fuel itself, uranium. Uranium is the raw material for nuclear energy, and you can't have a nuclear renaissance without it. Investing here usually means buying stock in uranium mining companies. These are the businesses that pull the raw ore out of the ground in places like Kazakhstan, Canada, and Australia. Think of this as the ultimate boom and bust commodity play. When sentiment for nuclear is low and there's an oversupply, the price of uranium craters, and mining stocks can lose 90% of their value. They become penny stocks left for dead. But when the cycle turns, when utilities realize they need to secure long-term fuel contracts for their reactors and a supply crunch hits, the price of uranium can go parabolic. The miners who survive the downturn can see their stock prices multiply 10, 20, even 50 times over. It is a market defined by extreme volatility, and it's not for the faint of heart. You're betting not just on the future of nuclear, but on the very specific and often opaque supply and demand dynamics of a single commodity. The second, and far more conservative, approach is to invest in the nuclear power plant operators themselves. These are typically large, established utility companies that own and operate the existing fleet of reactors. In the US, this includes giants like Constellation Energy, which is the country's largest nuclear operator. Unlike the miners, these companies aren't just a bet on the price of uranium. They are stable, regulated businesses that sell electricity, a product with constant demand. Their revenue is predictable, and they often pay reliable dividends. Investing here is less about a speculative boom and more about a belief that existing nuclear plants will be recognized as critical, cash-generating assets in a carbon-constrained world. The upside might be lower than the miners, but the downside is also significantly more protected. It's the slow and steady way to play the nuclear renaissance. But the third avenue is where the future gets truly exciting and speculative. This is the world of advanced nuclear technologies, specifically small modular reactors or SMRs. If traditional nuclear plants are like mainframe computers, massive, custom-built, and incredibly expensive, SMRs are like the personal computer. They are designed to be smaller, simpler, and mass-produced in a factory setting before being shipped to a site for installation. This approach promises to slash the insane construction costs and timelines that plagued the old guard. These advanced reactors also have passive safety features, making them physically incapable of the kind of meltdowns we saw in the past. Companies in this space, like NuScale Power or X-Energy, aren't just trying to power the grid. They're designing reactors small enough to power a single factory, a remote military base, or a massive data center. And that last part is critical. The explosion of artificial intelligence is creating an electricity demand so enormous that it's breaking all previous forecasts. A single AI query on a platform like ChatGPT uses 10 times more electricity than a simple Google search. Powering these massive AI data centers requires exactly what SMRs promise: clean, compact, and incredibly reliable 24/7 power. Investing in SMR companies today is like venture capital. Many will fail. The technology is still being proven at scale, and the regulatory hurdles are immense. But the first companies that successfully commercialize their designs could become the energy titans of the 21st century. Finally, for those who see the potential but don't want to pick individual winners and losers, there's the fourth option: exchange-traded funds or ETFs. There are specific ETFs that hold a basket of companies across the entire nuclear ecosystem. They'll own a mix of the volatile uranium miners, the stable utility operators, and even some of the up-and-coming SMR developers. This provides instant diversification. You're not betting on a single mine or a single reactor design. You're betting on the success of the entire sector. But before you get too excited, we have to talk about the immense risks that still hang over this industry. The political winds can shift in an instant. A new administration or a change in public sentiment can cancel subsidies and kill projects overnight. The problem of what to do with nuclear waste, while technically solvable, remains a political hot potato with no long-term solution in sight. And the deep-seated cultural fear of a nuclear accident, is always lurking. A single major incident anywhere in the world, even with older technology, could once again tarnish the entire industry for a generation, regardless of how safe the new designs are. Investing in nuclear energy is a bet that the world's desperate need for clean, reliable power will finally outweigh our decades-old fear of the atom. It's a bet that the brutal economics of the past can be solved by the innovative engineering of the future. It's a high-stakes game, where the potential rewards are matched only by the profound risks. It forces us to ask what we're more afraid of: the ghost of a nuclear past, or the reality of a carbon-choked future. But generating all this power, whether from solar, wind, or nuclear fission, is only half the battle. Because all the electricity in the world is useless if you can't store it, manage it, and get it to where it needs to go. The silent giant that underpins this entire energy transition isn't just about generation. It's about the grid itself. And that's where we're going next. The grid. It's the single largest and most complex machine ever built by humankind. Think of it as the circulatory system of our entire economy. You can have the strongest heart, the most powerful nuclear plant, or the most efficient lungs, a sprawling solar farm, but if the arteries and veins are clogged, old, and brittle, the whole system collapses. For decades, we've poured trillions into the generation side of the equation while largely ignoring the delivery system. We built a grid in the 20th century for a 20th century world. A world of large, centralized power plants, typically burning coal or gas, pushing power in one direction, outward to passive consumers. It was a simple top-down model, and it worked. But that model is now fundamentally broken. It's not just old, it's obsolete. It was designed for a predictable, steady flow of power. But the future of energy, as we've discussed, is anything but. It's decentralized, with millions of new power sources like rooftop solar panels and electric vehicles plugging in. And it's intermittent, with wind and solar generation fluctuating based on the weather, not on our demand. Trying to run a modern, renewable heavy energy system on our current grid is like trying to run a gigabit fiber optic internet service over ancient, crackling copper phone lines. It's a recipe for disaster. We're already seeing the consequences. Catastrophic failures during heat waves in Texas, wildfire risks from aging power lines in California, and widespread blackouts. This isn't just a problem. It's arguably one of the biggest investment opportunities of the next 30 years. The rewiring of America, a multi-trillion-dollar overhaul that touches every aspect of our electrical infrastructure. This isn't a speculative, futuristic bet. This is a mandatory, government-supported, and utility-backed necessity. The investment is happening now, and it's accelerating. So where does the money flow? It flows into three critical areas: the superhighways, the city streets, and the warehouses. First, let's talk about the superhighways. High-voltage transmission. The best places to generate renewable energy are often far from where people actually live. The strongest, most consistent winds are howling across the plains of the Midwest. The most intense, uninterrupted sunlight is baking the deserts of the Southwest. The problem is, there aren't massive power lines connecting these prime renewable energy zones to the major population centers on the coasts. We have an energy generation traffic jam. We're building all these new renewable power plants, but they have no way to get their product to market. This creates a colossal need for new long-distance, high-voltage transmission lines. These are the massive steel towers and thick cables you see marching across the countryside. Building them is a monumental undertaking, involving complex engineering, navigating regulations, and deploying immense capital. The companies that do this are in a fantastic position. We're talking about engineering and construction firms that specialize in this kind of massive infrastructure, manufacturers of the highly specialized components like high-voltage direct current, or HVDC, converters and advanced conductor cables, and even the large, regulated utilities that own and operate these transmission corridors, earning a stable, predictable return on their investment for decades to come. Investing in transmission is like investing in the railroads during the gold rush. It doesn't matter who finds the gold. Everyone has to pay to ship it. Next, we move from the superhighways to the city streets, the local distribution grid. This is the network of wooden poles and wires that brings electricity the final few miles to your home or business. For a century, this was a one-way street. Power flowed from the substation to you. But now, with rooftop solar, that's changing. Your neighbor might be generating more power than they can use, sending it back onto the grid. Your other neighbor might be plugging in their F-150 Lightning, suddenly drawing the same amount of power as a small house. The old distribution grid can't handle this chaotic two-way traffic. It becomes unstable, inefficient, and prone to failure. The solution is the smart grid. This means embedding technology, sensors, smart meters, automated switches, and advanced software into the local grid to make it intelligent. A smart grid can see what's happening in real time. It can reroute power to avoid an outage, manage the strain from thousands of EVs charging simultaneously, and efficiently integrate all that distributed solar power. This is a massive capital expenditure cycle for virtually every utility company in the country. They are spending billions upon billions to upgrade their local networks. This makes regulated utilities, once seen as slow-growing, boring investments, suddenly look like technology and infrastructure growth plays. Alongside them are the companies that make the smart components, the smart meters, the grid sensors, and the communication networks that allow this whole system to talk to itself. But even with new superhighways and smart city streets, you still have the fundamental problem of renewables. The sun doesn't always shine, and the wind doesn't always blow. This is the intermittency problem, and it has been the single biggest obstacle to widespread renewable adoption. The solution? The warehouses. I'm talking about energy storage, specifically grid-scale batteries. Energy storage is the holy grail. It's the technology that decouples power generation from power consumption. It allows us to capture the abundant, cheap solar energy generated in the middle of the afternoon and save it for the evening when demand peaks. It allows us to store the power from a windy night and use it during a calm morning. Batteries act as the grid's shock absorber, smoothing out the volatile peaks and valleys of renewable generation, turning an unreliable power source into a firm, dispatchable 24/7 resource. For a long time, this was just a dream. Lithium-ion battery costs were too high. But in the last decade, costs have plummeted by nearly 90%, and suddenly grid-scale storage isn't just possible. It's economically competitive. Huge battery installations the size of warehouses are being built next to solar and wind farms all over the country. This market is exploding. The investment opportunities here are vast. You have the battery manufacturers themselves, the companies developing next-generation battery chemistries beyond lithium-ion, and the project developers who build and operate these massive storage facilities, often selling their services to utilities under long-term contracts. Energy storage is the critical enabling technology for the entire energy transition. Without it, the dream of a 100% renewable grid remains just that, a dream. Finally, tying all of this together, the transmission, the distribution, and the storage is an invisible but crucial layer: software. The modern grid is becoming less about steel and copper and more about data and algorithms. Sophisticated software platforms are now essential for managing the complexity of this new energy system. Artificial intelligence is being used to forecast energy demand with incredible accuracy, predict when a piece of equipment might fail, and optimize the flow of electrons across the network every millisecond to ensure the lowest cost and highest reliability. Companies that provide this brains of the grid are a fascinating, high-growth corner of the energy sector. They are often asset-light, high-margin businesses that provide an essential service to the massive, capital-heavy utilities. They are the hidden intelligence layer that makes the whole system work. So, when you think about the grid, don't just picture old wooden poles. Picture a dynamic, high-tech, interconnected system undergoing a complete, ground-up rebuild. The investment required is staggering, measured in the trillions of dollars over the coming decades. It's a secular trend that is non-negotiable if we want a reliable, clean energy future. The opportunities are not just in the flashy renewable generation we've already discussed, but in the essential, unglamorous, and deeply profitable business of building the infrastructure that makes it all possible. We've now covered the entire energy landscape, from the legacy oil and gas giants navigating their own transition, to the nuclear workhorses providing baseline power, to the explosive growth of solar and wind, and finally, to the critical grid infrastructure that ties it all together. We've identified the players, the technologies, and the titanic forces reshaping the most important industry on Earth. But knowing the pieces on the chessboard is one thing. Playing the game to win is something else entirely. How do you assemble these different pieces into a resilient, profitable portfolio that can weather the storms of this transition? How do you balance the stability of a regulated utility with the explosive growth potential of a battery technology startup? How do you separate the durable long-term winners from the short-term hype? That is the final and most important piece of the puzzle. The answer isn't a secret stock tip or a complex algorithm. It's a strategy, a framework for thinking that separates seasoned investors from gamblers. It's called the core and satellite approach, and it's the perfect model for a sector as diverse and dynamic as energy. Imagine your investment portfolio is a naval fleet. The core of your fleet is the aircraft carrier. It's massive, powerful, and incredibly stable. It's not the fastest ship, but it projects power and can withstand the stormiest seas. In your energy portfolio, this is your core. It should be made up of the giants, the blue-chip companies that form the bedrock of the global energy system. Think of the largest integrated oil and gas majors, the ones with decades of reserves, massive refining capacity, and global distribution networks. These companies are cash flow machines, often paying reliable, growing dividends that act as a ballast for your portfolio. Your core could also include the largest regulated utilities in the country. These are often government-sanctioned monopolies. They might not offer explosive growth, but they provide essential services, generate predictable earnings, and deliver consistent returns year after year. This core is your foundation. It's what you build upon. It's designed not to shoot the lights out, but to ensure the lights stay on. Now, surrounding that aircraft carrier are the satellites. These are your nimble destroyers, your stealthy submarines, and your lightning-fast fighter jets. They are smaller, more specialized, and carry much more risk, but they also have the potential for incredible speed and impact. These are your growth plays. This is where you place your bets on the future. A satellite might be a pure-play solar panel manufacturer with a technological edge, a lithium mining company with a promising new discovery, or that battery technology startup with a revolutionary solid-state design. It could be a company pioneering green hydrogen production or one developing small modular nuclear reactors. Each satellite is a targeted bet on a specific technological or market trend. Some of these fighter jets might get shot down. Some of these startups will fail and their stock will go to zero. That is the risk you must accept. But the ones that succeed, the ones that become the next generation leaders, can deliver returns that are 10, 50, or even 100 times your initial investment, fundamentally changing the performance of your entire portfolio. The core provides stability and income. The satellites provide the explosive growth potential. By combining them, you balance the present with the future. You participate in the reliable cash flows of today's energy system, while simultaneously positioning yourself to profit from the disruptive innovations of tomorrow. The exact allocation is up to you. A more conservative investor might have 80% in the core and 20% in satellites. A younger, more aggressive investor might choose a 60-40, or even a 50-50 split. The strategy is flexible, but the principle is universal. Build on a foundation of strength, then take calculated risks on the frontier. But this framework only works if you can successfully identify the right companies to fill those slots. And that brings us to the second critical question: how do you separate the durable winners from the short-term hype? This requires rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard work of due diligence. It's about becoming a detective, looking for clues that a company is the real deal. First, investigate the management team. Who is running the ship? Are they seasoned industry veterans with a track record of building businesses and navigating complex markets? Or are they charismatic promoters who are great at giving interviews but have never actually run a profitable enterprise? Look for engineers, geologists, and operators in leadership positions, not just financiers. A great idea is worthless without a team that can execute it. Second, scrutinize the technology and the competitive moat. What is the company's unique advantage? Is their technology truly proprietary and protected by strong patents? Or is it easily replicated? A company that claims to have a better solar panel isn't interesting. A company that has a patented, proven process that makes their panels 20% more efficient than any competitor on Earth for half the cost, that is interesting. This advantage, this moat, is what protects them from being swamped by competitors. It could be superior technology, exclusive government contracts, a key geographical location, or a well-established brand. Without a moat, there is no long-term business. Third, and this is non-negotiable, you must analyze their financial health. This is where most hyped-up story stocks fall apart. Start with the balance sheet. How much cash do they have and how much debt are they carrying? A company with a mountain of debt and very little cash is living on borrowed time. For a pre-profit startup, the most important metric is their cash runway. How many months can they continue to operate before they run out of money? If they don't have a clear path to profitability or access to more funding, they are a ticking time bomb. Next, look at cash flow. Are they burning through cash at an accelerating rate? Or are they showing signs of generating actual cash from their operations? Press releases or talk. Revenue is nice, but positive cash flow is the ultimate proof that a business model works. It is the lifeblood that allows a company to survive, grow, and innovate without being dependent on fickle capital markets. Finally, look for real customers and real contracts. A memorandum of understanding is not a contract. A potential partnership is not a deal. Look for binding purchase orders and long-term supply agreements with credible customers. A startup that has signed a 10-year deal to supply batteries to Ford or General Motors is in a completely different league than one that is just in advanced talks. Real customers paying real money is the ultimate validation of a company's product and its future. By applying this 4-part filter: management, moat, money, and market, you can begin to systematically sift through the noise. You can start to see which companies have a solid foundation and which are just a house of cards built on a good story. Ultimately, all of this, the core and satellite strategy, the due diligence, must be guided by your own personal investment thesis. You have to step back and decide what you believe about the future of energy. There is no single right answer, and smart people can be found on all sides of the debate. Do you believe that the transition to renewables will happen far faster than anyone predicts? If so, your portfolio should be heavily weighted towards wind, solar, storage, and the critical minerals that enable them. Do you believe that natural gas is the essential, non-negotiable bridge fuel that will be needed for decades to power the grid and support intermittent renewables? Then your portfolio should reflect that, with a focus on pipelines, LNG export facilities, and efficient gas-fired power producers. Or maybe you believe that concerns over climate change and energy security will spark a global renaissance in nuclear power. In that case, you'd be exploring uranium miners and the next generation of reactor designers. Form your thesis. Write it down. Base it on data, on research, and on your understanding of the world. Then build a portfolio that reflects that thesis. This is what transforms you from a passive spectator into an active participant. You're no longer just chasing stock tickers. You're investing in your vision of the future. Over this series, we've journeyed from the depths of a Permian Basin oil well to the cutting edge of a fusion reactor. We've seen how a geopolitical event in the Middle East can ripple through the price of gasoline in Ohio, and how a technological breakthrough in a California lab can reshape the future of the electric grid. We've seen that energy is not a single monolithic industry. It is a sprawling, interconnected ecosystem of old and new, of fossil fuels and renewables, of immense stability and radical disruption. Investing in this sector is more than just a financial calculation. It is a vote. Every dollar you allocate to a company is a small piece of capital that helps them build their version of tomorrow. Are you casting a vote for the continued dominance of hydrocarbons? Are you funding the rapid expansion of wind and solar? Are you making a bet on the long-shot potential of hydrogen or fusion? The market, in its vast and chaotic wisdom, will ultimately pick the winners and losers. But as an investor, you get a say. You get to place your chips on the future you believe in. The great energy transition isn't an event that will happen to us. It's a process that we are all building, one investment, one innovation, one decision at a time. The question is no longer if the world's energy landscape will change. The only question left is, what role will you play in shaping it?